masyadong iniisip yung ginagawa ng Panginoon. But in all this explanation of this wonderful or supra-temporal, goes while the seasonal approach that affects the Egyptian ecosystem offers some insight into the order and perhaps even some or all of the mechanism that were used. So kahit ano pang isipin nila, ano pang gagawin nila, na mechanism na use nila, hindi pa rin nila ma-explain kung bakit yung pagkamatay ng mga firstborn in the 10 plagues, bakit nagsabay-sabay. So, hindi nila ma-explain yung bagay na yun, kung bakit nangyari yun. So, para sa atin, talagang may gawa ng Panginoon, di ba? So, pero sa kanila, yung mga matatalinong niya, mga sigit, gumagawa sila ng mga inaan nila sa mga universe, physical earth, physical structure, mga ganyan. So the plagues in the Egyptian pantheon, ibig sabihin ng so punta na muna tayo sa numbers. Anong sabihin natin sa numbers? 34 is Israelites is out. Pakibasa nga.
Israelites set out from Moses the 15th day of the first month, the day after the Passover. They marched out holding unto you all the Egyptians, who were buried under the river, whom the Lord has come down.
So, kung isipin natin, parang nakakatakot, di ba? Kung sa atin nangyari kaya yun. Pag sinabing pantheon, itong pantheon, pag sinabing pantheon sa inyong sulat, sa inyong papel, isabihin, tingnan ang meaning nun is about that dedicated to all God. A temple, yan siya, ginagamitan ng temple dedicated to all God. So the place in the Egyptian pantheon na tayo sa inyong handout. Tapos, so dyan, according to the place, can be seen as a series of attacks on the Egyptian pantheon. Ibig sabihin ng pantheon nga, diba, sabi natin meaning, a temple dedicated to all God. Temple, meron silang temple dyan na dedicated to all God, yung parang Diyos-Diyusan nila ng mga Egyptian. Kasi the plague of blood, meron silang tinatawag na the plague of blood daw, the first plague was directed against the God of Nom. So the creator of water and life are against happy. Yung pangalan silang Diyos-Diyusan na happy. The God of Nile, or maybe against Osiris. Osiris na naman. Against the God of Osiris. Most bloodstream was the Nile. You shall notice that their worshippers were lived without protection against the death of the firstborn. So, totoo naman talaga kasi kita mo, kahit ang anak ng Pharaoh, di ba, namatay. Kasi wala nga siya ng protection against the place. At saka wala silang protection from the God. So, kaya nangyari, kaya ang sinasabi niya yung sa blood, the 10th plague is treated differently by the previous 9 plagues. And on the very night that God would deliver Israelites from Egypt, He struck the firstborn of Egypt with a scourge of death. So in Exodus 12:31, during the night, the Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. Kasama pala ni Moses si Aaron ang gabi na yon. Sabi niya sa Exodus 31. And
he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise up and go forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord in his temple.
So pumayag din siya ngayon na umalis sila. Kasi noon, nagsasabi sila 3 days na pumunta sila doon sa magkasala, offer to God. Ayaw niya pumayag din. Pero kaya pumayag din siya dahil marami nangyayari sa kanyang teritoryo, sa kanyang city. So that time, during after the Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, update my people, and the Israelites go. So, masaya sila dahil when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague cannot be in you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So, hindi wala nangyari sa kanila mga anak, di ba? So, yan, dyan na sila, umalis na sila kasi pinayagan na sila ng Pharaoh. So, after that, from Ramesses, then Israel journeyed to Sukkot. So, yan ang Sukkot. Yan ang Sukkot sa simula ng yan ang Goshen. Yan ang Sukkot. So, may tao. So, yan sila simula. So, as I generally identified with the Egyptian king, the present still El Moskuta at the mouth of the Wadi Umila, near the modern town of Ismailia. So this was one of the gateways of the desert, to the desert pala. Yan may araw yung kanilang yung yellow. So the number of people traveling with Moses at this time is said to be about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. So this would mean a total entourage of over 2 million people, along with this vast number of people fleeing Egypt, was the mixed crowd. That the doubt included some Egyptian who was being moved when they saw the plagues that fell upon their nation. So, natakot din iba mga Egyptian, sumama na rin sila sa mga Hebreo, sila Moses. Kasi natakot na sila dahil sa mga nangyari doon sa kanilang syudad. So those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord hurried to bring their slaves and their livestock. Yan, sasabi yan. Dinala nila, pati rin ang kanilang mga patulong, kanilang mga hayupan, until at this point, the people had been arrived at the Sea, which in Hebrew called Yam Sap. Ang tawag sa Hebrew ng Red Sea is Yam Sap. So many scholars will complain about equating Yam Sap, were chosen for the crossing of the Red Sea. So marami na naman ditong nagpupunta ng mga scholars, mga tungkol sa kanilang mga pag-travel dito sa Red Sea kasi ang sabi nila, because Pharaoh's lake that was a shallow body of water in which the Egyptian, this Yam Sap would be the water of the bitter lake itself.
No.
So deep enough for the miraculous lake to be taken to the Impure. So may sabi rin na mababaw lang yung Pharaoh's lake. Bakit? Doon sila sabi nga tumawid. Supposed to be dapat nilang tawiran is bitter lake. Kasi mas malalim. So, tama-tama yung sa mga kanon nila, sa sakyan ng kabayo na malinis. So the Lake of Exodus, in dating na naman, marami na naman ang comments dito. In dating this event, it has become almost unquestionable na naman among archaeologists and technical scholars to assert that the Israelites lived Egypt around 1270 to 1250 before Christ toward the end of the late Bronze Age, 1550 to 1200 before Christ. So the second issue concerns the claim of one of the store cities built by the Israelites. Ibig sabihin ng store cities, yung inalisan nila yon ng mga Israelites, ang tawag doon ay store cities. That is the store cities built by the Israelites. At ang namumuno doon, ang dito ay si Ramesses. Yan, si Ramesses. Yan sa ginawa, nilagay ko lang dyan, kasi yung sa story ng movie, parang siya yung ano doon, pero hindi talaga siya yan.
Bago siya, oh. Bago yung mga ilalagay.
Sana all.
Portrait.
So yan ang mga ginawa. Ang tawag sa kanila dyan ay a Pharaoh slave labor. So So during Ramesses time, Ram,
Ramesses or Ramses?
Ramses.
Pareho lang yun.
Ramses ang tawag. Okay, Ramses ang tawag ko.
Basta may ES, hindi Ramses.
Ramses or Rameses.
So the role of more than 68 years in order to allow for the years of construction. So mga 68 years in order to allow for the years of construction that agree to kill or the male babies in the first 8 years of Moses' life. So third issue is the massive destruction of several Canaanite cities dates to the 13th century before Christ. The evidence from these Canaanite sites that might indicate the identity of the invaders. So mayroon silang mga ebidensya yung talagang totoong nangyari na talagang ginawa yan nila noon. Yan, mga ganyan. Kita mo yung mga Torres construction nila, kung gusto mo na doon. Yan yung ebidensya ng ginawa ng mga Israelite sa Egypt. Ang tawag sa kanila doon, apiro, yung mga slave labor ni Ramses. So, the only text describing any political or military activity in this period are the Til El Amarna tablets. May Til Amarna tablets din silang natagpuan. Yung mga ganyan, mga ebidensya na may nakasulat din dyan na sila lang nasa unawa yun. The case for the destruction of Jericho is likewise just as strong as
Tanungin natin si Kuya kung ano ibig sabihin.
the destruction of Hazar, despite the following extensive damage of weather at the debate over chronological issue at Jericho. This will be treated in more detail in the chapter on the conquest. So the third city that the Bible claims was among the only 3 sites were burned and destroyed by Israel. So continues to be mystery because of uncertainty of its location. So Exodus came in Merneptah's first year, in 1130 before Christ until 1900 before Christ. So Ramesses II, the pharaoh of Exodus, reigned in the 19th dynasty, 1236 to 1304 before Christ, and then preceded by City 1, who only reigned from
Please record yan.
1304 to 1318. So Ramses I is only reigned from 1318 to 1320, so 2 years lang. So those Merneptah, inuuna nila sa
130
books,
lang.
kaya nagtaka nga ako. Kasi nauna
Red
pa
na lang
yung
ang small. Wala na.
nangyari na sa dapat yung una sa atin.
Babalik yung
Oo, sa books, nagtaka nga ako.
Wala nang
Pero
small.
okay lang, sunod ko lang.
Red na lang. Wala nang blue.
So those Merneptah, not Ramses II, must be pharaohs exodus for this theory, si Ramses daw. Ang theory nila, si Ramses, ang pharaoh during that time na ginawa nila yung ayan. So the Amarna age of Amarna tablets in 1887. So some 130 tablets. Marami pa dyan na sila 30 tablets were discovered at till Amama about 180 miles south of Cairo. So yung Cairo, kita natin malapit doon. Kita natin yung mapa ng
There's something about what? Amarna complex.
Oo. Ha?
Hindi niya alam. Pag-worship nila.
Sa Amarna tablets, Amarna 8 and Amarna tablets, kita mo? Yung na-discover nila, kasama ng mga ganyan, kaya ngayon tourist spot na, kasi may mga tablets, kaya nakasulat doon sa bato na yun, na parang may mga sinasabi sila doon na tungkol na nakatuhanan tungkol sa ginawa sa kanila ng pero Ramses. Oh. Para hindi sila makalimutan kahit wala sila sa mundo, pero yung mga susunod ng mga natin, tayo iba, sunod tayo, alam natin yung story ng kanilang buhay na ang ginawa ng Panginoon. Kanilang buhay. So,
Kaya pala kanina,
so punta na tayo ngayon sa chapter 30. Ay, sa...
Akin na yan, kuya.
So, ma'am, o next time?
Next week po. Next week ako.
Tapos na po ang chapter 12, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ang ganda ng blog mo.
Sabi ko sa'yo eh. Royal blue.
Walang question?
Questions?
Parang tayo mga best friends na.
Susunod na siya, ma'am.
Choice. Sige. Isa lang naman na chapter.
Tanggalin ko na kayo, bro.
Okay, thank you, bro. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for... Mayroon gusto mong bigay sa akin. Dalawang yun po, ma'am.
Ang mahaba ng report nila. Ako kulang pa sa 1 page ng summary. Oh, ito.
This is a straightforward reporting.
Okay na, no? Yan.
Yes, pwede nabuhusan ako ng papel. Likod.
Pero pa pang mga likod, ha?
Hindi may dot ka o iba
Kaya
yung
nga, ako yung tawag dito sa likod. Brown.
Okay, so good afternoon. So I'll be reporting chapter 11. Hindi na yung Joseph kasi i-report na ni Brother Abel. So this is like very quick lang. Okay, so at yung presentation ko is very easy. It's just like pambatang ano, not like analytical tulad yung ginagawa nila, no? So, okay, let's start. Introduction. Before the birth of Joseph, before the Moses' birth, Joseph saved the children of Israel from famine. Because of Joseph's effort in the past, had saved Egypt from ruin, and so his family was welcomed into the land. Generations later, there was a tremendous growth in their population, forming a nation made up of 12 tribes, one for each son of Jacob, or also known as Israel. They are the Hebrew people, and they stayed in Egypt for 430 years. So, time dumating si Joseph sa mga around Middle Kingdom, ano? And, at pinanganak naman si Moses sa dynasty ng New Kingdoms. So, okay. So the Hykes and the king who did not know him. No Joseph. Yes.
Breathe.
Yes. Okay. Prior to Moses' birth, Jacob Jacob's family had grown drastically. A new king, or also known as the Pharaoh, arose in Egypt who did not know Joseph, suggesting that the previous Pharaoh did not respect Joseph's role in saving their nation, while the new ruler had either had no knowledge or concern to the history. However, the specific ruler was he saw that the Hebrew people as a threat to Egyptian rule. Why? Because the new Pharaoh was threatened because the Hebrew people had grown so enormously. So he was afraid that if these people will join his enemy's army, it easily will topple his kingdom. So what did he do? So as Israelites grew rapidly in numbers, so they feared as they could potentially topple their kingdom. So their king brutally enslaved the people of Israel and gave them heavy workloads in attempt to reduce their numbers. Yet this effort fails. So he commanded midwives to kill the Hebrew newborn baby boys. When this failed as well, the Pharaoh resorted to order the murder of all Hebrew infant boys. And through this, unknowingly, the very situation which led to the rise of Israel's eventual leader, Moses. So the next one, itong nangyari, no? So Moses born into a humble Levitical slave family in Egypt. Moses' life was immediately threatened when Pharaoh ordered all Hebrew male infants to be thrown in the Nile. Though his mother Jochebed hid him for some time, she was eventually forced to set him adrift in a basket at the Nile River. So here Moses is. And the next, the infant was rescued by a Pharaoh's daughter that found him and adopted him into the elite of Egyptian royalty. So ito nangyari, and she found it, adopted him. So what happened? And he became a prince of Egypt, one of the princes of Egypt. So Moses and the new kingdom in Egypt. So the new kingdom also referred to us as Egyptian Empire. In the period of ancient Egyptian history, between 16th century BC and 11th century BC, covering the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasty of Egypt. There are discrepancies in determining who exactly the pharaoh were at that particular time, as archaeological evidence archaeologists and biblical scholars cannot agree, or their findings are mismatched. So what happened here? When Joseph became a prince, Moses became a prince, he saw, I think he got already knowledge that he's one of these people. So he saw that they were burdened with the slavery. So one day, he saw that one Egyptian had, abused one of the Hebrew and he killed him, buried him in the sun, and what happened? He afraid that he thought somebody saw him. Somebody saw him, and actually also Hebrews, as we know. Then he was scared of his life that he might be, punished. So he ran away. Okay, he ran away to that place, and where he went? He went to Midian. So this is his route. So Midian is surrounded area. So what happened in Midian? When Moses was 40 years old, 14 na siya at the time, he was enraged by the act of Egyptian, abusing a Hebrew slave. So he killed him and he ran away to Midian. It happens upon that he met 7 daughters of Jethro, the Midian priest. The daughters are at well in the desert trying to water their sheep. So Moses cared of some bullying shepherds who was harassing the girls. A grateful Jethro gave Moses his daughter Zipporah for marriage. Despite the religious differences, they got married and had children. Okay, the fugitive Moses was condemned to live in with Jethro, and he became a shepherd in the wilderness. Moses-in-law actually are not called Midianites, but Kenites. Kenite was a status, not a tribe, Smith. Okay? Moses lived in this place for 40 years. Again, after some times, God speak to Moses through a burning bush.
Very good.
Set out, and after that, Moses set out with his family to return to Egypt with a mission to free his people from slavery. So, from our conclusion, we know that we can learn from here in the life of Moses. He murdered somebody, but yet God still gave him a chance. So, sabi nga, no matter how difficult our circumstances in life, our God will never forsake us. God has a plan to bring salvation to all and uses ordinary men and women like us to carry His purpose. If we trust Him, humble ourselves, and are willing to step up and answer His call. Thank you.
Yes.
O diba? Sabi ko nga, it's a straightforward.
Ano ibig sabihin ng sa likod?
Siya, matalino siya.
Likod yan, likod.
Okay.
Likod. Bawel, okay. Yung sabihin yan,
Sabi niya, patouch.
patay. Hindi
Iba-
patouch.
iba-
At sige, uri nun.
Nag-aral kami ng Hebrew language. Ito yung first honor namin.
Wow!
Wow. Sana all.
Sana mo lang, nilagyan mo ng translation ang ibig sabihin.
Naubusan ako ng papel, kaya yun na lang yung sunduin-tingan ko.
English yan.
Okay. For our quiz, let's go first kasi may tayo po din an hour, di ba? So let's go first sa last part ng ano natin, Bahasin mo ako. I will sort out mamaya. Si Sam, Gigi, wala na kayong may pasa. Sam, wala ka kumain. Meron akong dalawa. Anyway, I have the list, okay? At least alam niyo kung ano.
I'm done already.
Okay, good. So, thank you. Yes, thank you. So, we had done the tabernacle with kasi hindi natin natapos yung Leviticus, right? We only had the offerings and the sacrifices. Well, kailangan ko ng ano. yung
Sorry ma'am,
video.
na-stranded ako sa
Checkpoint.
Ilagay
sa YouTube.
yes.
Nice to see you, ma'am.
So, we'll be looking at the priest. Okay, hindi natin yan na...
The garments.
Oo, alright?
Pwede naman.
That he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And thou shalt make holy garments for Aaron thy brother for glory.
Si Sam.
And these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate, and an ephod, and a robe, and a broidered coat, a mitre, and a girdle. And they shall make holy garments for Aaron thy brother and his sons, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And they shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, and of purple, of scarlet, and fine twined linen, of cunning work. It shall have the 2 shoulder pieces thereof joined at the 2 edges thereof, and so it shall be joined together. And the curious girdle of the ephod which is upon it shall be of the same, according to the work thereof, even of gold, of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. And thou shalt take 2 onyx stones, and grave on them the names of the children of Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the other 6 names of the rest on the other stone, according to their birth. With the work of an engraver in stone, like the engravings of the signet, shalt thou engrave the 2 stones with the names of the children of Israel. Thou shalt make them to be set in ouches of gold. And thou shalt put the 2 stones upon the shoulders of the ephod for stones of memorial unto the children of Israel. And Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord upon his 2 shoulders for a memorial. And thou shalt make ouches of gold, and 2 chains of pure gold at the ends. Of wreathen work shalt thou make them, and fasten wreathen chains to the ouches. And thou shalt make the breastplate of judgment with cunning work. After the work of the ephod thou shalt make it. Of gold, of blue, and of purple, and of scarlet, and of fine twined linen shalt thou make it. 4 square it shall be, being doubled. A span shall be the length thereof, and a span shall be the breadth thereof. And thou shalt set in it settings of stones, even 4 rows of stones. The first row shall be a sardius, a topaz, and a carbuncle. This shall be the first row. And the second row shall be an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. And the third row a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. And the 4th row a beryl, and an onyx, and a jasper. They shall be set in gold in their enclosures. And the stones shall be with the names of the children of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of the signet. Every one with his name shall they be according to the 12 tribes. And thou shalt make upon the breastplate chains at the ends of wreathen work of pure gold. Thou shalt make upon the breastplate 2 rings of gold, and shalt put the 2 rings on the 2 ends of the breastplate. And thou shalt put the 2 wreathen chains of gold in the 2 rings which are on the ends of the breastplate. And the other 2 ends of the 2 wreathen chains thou shalt fasten in the 2 ouches, and put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod before it. And thou shalt make 2 rings of gold, and thou shalt put them upon the 2 ends of the breastplate in the border thereof, which is in the side of the ephod inward. And 2 other rings of gold thou shalt make, and shalt put them on the 2 sides of the ephod underneath, toward the forepart thereof, over against the other coupling thereof, above the curious girdle of the ephod. And they shall bind the breastplate by the rings thereof unto the rings of the ephod with a lace of blue, that it may be above the curious girdle of the ephod, and that the breastplate be not loosed from the ephod. And Aaron shall bear the names of the children of Israel in the breastplate of judgment upon his heart, when he goeth in unto the holy place, for a memorial before the Lord continually. And thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and the Thummim, and they shall be upon Aaron's heart when he goeth in before the Lord. And Aaron shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before the Lord continually. And thou shalt make the robe of the ephod all of blue, and there shall be an hole in the top of it in the midst thereof. It shall have a binding of woven work round about the hole of it, as it were the hole of an habergeon, that it be not rent. And beneath upon the hem of it thou shalt make pomegranates of blue, and of purple, and of scarlet round about the hem thereof, and bells of gold between them round about, a golden bell and a pomegranate, golden bell and a pomegranate upon the hem of the robe round about. And it shall be upon Aaron to minister. And his sound shall be heard when he goeth in unto the holy place before the Lord, when he cometh out, that he die not.
That's a sign na
And thou shalt make a plate of pure gold, and grave upon it like the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord. And thou shalt put it on a blue lace, that it may be upon the mitre, on the forefront of the mitre, and it shall be upon Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things which the children of Israel shall hallow in all their holy gifts. and it shall be always upon his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord. And thou shalt embroider the coat of fine linen, and thou shalt make the mitre of fine linen, and thou shalt make the girdle of needlework. And for Aaron's sons thou shalt make coats, and thou shalt make for them girdles, and bonnets shalt thou make for glory and for beauty. And thou shalt put them upon Aaron thy brother and his sons with him, and shalt anoint them, and consecrate them, and sanctify them, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office. And thou shalt make them linen breeches to cover their nakedness. From the loins even unto the thighs they shall reach. And they shall be upon Aaron and upon his sons, when they come in unto the tabernacle of the congregation, or when they come near unto the altar to minister in the holy place. That they bear not iniquity and die. It shall be a statute forever unto him and his seed after him.
Na-discuss na ba natin yung Book of Leviticus? Not the outline?
Yeah.
Not yet, ma'am.
Ito, ma'am.
Wala nag-i-exam o nirapsan.
So you would see na the Catholic priests still follow. Yes,
Pero mas masyado
Pero wala, mas magbago.
yung kanila attire.
Pero yung breastplate wala na.
Tapos yung
Yung suot lang nila, yung garments na.
nilalagay nila.
The Book of Leviticus, we know you've been avoiding it because it's weird. So let's fix that. Now remember, the story of the Bible began with humans in God's presence, but they were banished because of their rebellion. However, God wants to be in relationship with us, so he chooses one family that he will use to restore the world back into his presence.
And so God's presence comes to dwell in a tent right in the middle of Israel.
And that's great.
But it creates a problem because it's so intense that Moses can't come in, and other priests who enter inappropriately, they die.
Well, wait, if God's presence is good, how is it all of a sudden dangerous for people?
So think of it this way. God's presence is like the sun. It's pure power and goodness. And when something mortal and corruptible gets close to such pure power, it's destroyed. And so the word holiness is used in Leviticus to describe God's pure and powerful presence, which, like the sun, is both good and dangerous. So the point of Leviticus is to show how corrupt Israelites can live near God's goodness without being destroyed. Now, in the book, there are 3 ways for how this is all going to work out, and these are going to seem strange to you, but just hang in there with us.
The first one is rituals. The second is this idea of the priesthood, and the third is a bunch of purity laws.
Now, the book is broken up into 7 sections, and each solution is explored in 2 sections of the book. The rituals are here, the priests are here, and the purity laws go here.
Now, the first solution, rituals, involves a lot of animal sacrifices. And so Leviticus begins with detailed instructions for how to make these sacrifices. Some are ways of saying thank you to God, and others are simply ways of saying I'm sorry.
And here at the end of the book, there are some more rituals. And these are about observing sacred days, festivals. They're all celebrations that retell some part of the story of how God rescued Israel and set them apart from the nations.
The second solution to the holiness problem has to do with priests. You see, being directly in God's presence is really dangerous. So he appoints priests as special representatives who can go into his presence on behalf of others.
So in this section, we have a story about how the priests are ordained into the priesthood. And then this other section explains the set of higher standards that the priests have to live by because they work so closely to God's presence.
The third solution in the book is all about purity laws. And this is by far the hardest thing to understand. For example, in this section, we're really concerned with knowing whether you're clean or unclean.
Or another way of saying that is being pure and impure. Here's what we need to know to understand this. When you're in a pure state, you can be near God's presence.
when you're in an impure state, you can't. And so it was really important for Israelites to know what state they're in at any given moment.
So the first thing we have is a list of pure and impure animals.
Yeah, this list of animals is divided up by where they live. So on the land, in the sea, in the air. And the text is just not clear about why certain animals are impure or why touching or eating them makes you impure. What is clear, however, is that avoiding these creatures will set Israel apart, and it will remind them that God's own holiness should affect every part of their lives, including what they eat.
After the food laws, we get a lot of random rules about things like skin disease, touching dead bodies, what to do with bodily fluids.
But they're not random. All of these are things that the Israelites associated with life and death, which are sacred things because God is the author of life.
Okay, but simply coming into contact with these things makes you impure.
They do, but we have to keep in mind that it's not wrong or sinful to be ritually impure. You just wait a few days, take a bath, offer a sacrifice, and you're pure again. What is inappropriate is entering into God's presence when you're in an impure state.
Now, there's more purity laws over here in this section.
Yeah, these focus on Israel's moral behavior. So these are laws about social justice, healthy relationships, having sexual integrity. Living by these laws will make Israel into a morally pure people who can live near God's presence.
Those are the three solutions. Now, you probably noticed that they surround the very center of this book. And it's here that we find a really important ritual called the Day of Atonement.
Yeah, so Israel's a big tribe now. Odds are there's a lot of sin happening that goes unnoticed that people are not dealing with. And so one time a year, the priests would take 2 goats. And one of those goats is killed, and its blood is carried right into God's presence where it symbolically covers or atones for Israel's sin.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Well, the meaning of the sacrifice is explained in the next chapter, where God says that the blood of a creature is its life. And so this goat's life is offered as a substitute. It's receiving God's punishment for Israel's sin so that the people don't have to.
That leaves the second goat.
Yeah, the priest puts his hands on it, and then he confesses all of the sins of Israel. It's like he's placing the sins on the goat. And then that goat gets cast out forever into the wilderness. It's called the scapegoat.
Yeah, I've heard that word before.
Yeah, it's a very powerful image of how God is graciously removing Israel's sin.
But let's be honest, sacrifices in general seem so barbaric.
We have to remember that in the ancient world, sacrifices were the main way of buying favor from the gods. But the problem was that those same gods, they're unpredictable, they're fickle, you never know if they're going to ignore you or they're going to turn on you. And so it's in this cultural setting that we see Israel's God is totally different. He does get angry about human corruption, but it is never arbitrary. And he loves people. So he provides this clear way for Israel to know with confidence that they are forgiven and that despite their corruption, they are safe to live near his presence. And so that makes the book of Leviticus actually a revolutionary statement in its day.
So that's Leviticus. But Israel's still at Mount Sinai in the middle of the wilderness. They need a place to live.
Yes, the land God promised to Abraham. So the journey to that land is what the next book of the Bible is all about. Hi, this is Tim.
And this is John.
We believe the Bible is telling one overall story from beginning to end. So we're making videos about each individual book of the Bible and its unique design.
That's it. Anyway, I told you last week that I'm going to show you yung mga edad nila at saka yung the first from Adam to Abraham. Okay? So, kung titignan natin at least you can really see, kung si Abraham ito, and titignan niyo si Lamed. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, kung titignan niyo si Abraham, okay, ito yung lifespan. Ang lifespan ni Adam is 930 years. Okay, so ang 930, i-add ninyo ang 130 kasi si Seth is 130 years. Okay? And then si Enos is 235. So ito yung number of years dito. Okay, ito yung number of years. Okay, i-add to with this. And then ito ang resulta. 930, of course, 930 lang. But if you add 930 and 130 equals, tama ba? Ha? 1,060.
130 plus 912 is 1042.
1042. So, pag-check na kung ilang taon siya, no? Ilang years si sis na nabuhay. Look at your Genesis.
Ano ma'am, 912 plus 130 dapat. Kaya makuha 1,042.
No. 900.
100 years, next month.
No. It is, ang ibig sabihin niyan, ma'am, I think is that Seth lived 130 years and began Enos,
Yeah.
and then he lived 912 more years, yes. After he begat Enos.
After na, ito. Tingnan din natin sa ano. So, okay. So, thank you. So, kung titingnan natin, so, okay, from 930 years, ito yung number of years na nila. Ito na yung,
Yes, correct.
oo, ilang taon sila. And then, dito sa kay Noah, this will be the time na may flood. Okay? So, but then, tingnan niyo yung si Noah at saka si Abraham. Right? Kung titingnan natin, i-straight natin yan, ano, you could see na nakita pa si Noah at saka si Abraham.
Oo.
You know? There is an overlap.
Yes.
Okay? So, I just want you to know, dahil hindi natin ito makita kung masahin lang natin ang Bible. Right? But you can see here that there is an overlap. So you can just imagine, okay.
Ma'am, no, kasi Terra, hindi kaya Abraham, kasi 2008. Si Terra, kasi 2005.
Oh, but then if you go straight,
Yeah, ma'am.
may pa rin, kasi great,
Kasi 2008
talagang, ano, si Abraham dito. So, the point dito ay, when Adam had sis, kasi wala naman si Cain at saka Abel, di ba? Wala na sila. So, Adam would be able to tell sis how they were created. And then si Sis could pass it to Enos.
Yes.
Nawawan niyo ko?
Yes.
So, they could be telling their children kasi buhay pa sila. And you can imagine that Noah could have told ang tanda na niya kay Abraham about the flood. See, they could still relate yung what they have experienced with God because nakita natin yung mga overlap. They were still alive. Okay? So, I just want to show us this. Kasi, importante yun dahil, paano nila alam na ganito? You would see this question. Bakit alam nila yung story ng it's because of this. Okay? You can explain that they were the grandchildren and then ilan pang generation because they live long. Okay? They live long. So, kaya, makita natin yun. Do you guys understand? Alright? Okay. So, anyway, I will have more later on. Right? So, but let's have a bit muna. Okay, I get ready.
Sa YouTube, maganda mga
Yung ano pala yun, yung year pala yun.
Parang yung dingding lang ako, nakikita ko nga.
Bakit nila na isasabi na the year nang mula kay Abraham at na-trace yung year na from there.
Oo, it's because they follow yung year.
Saka yung bakit the time that pumunta yung mga sinira ng Roman Empire, yung temple, kasi is one of the reason is ang mga Jewish, they recorded the events at the mga year. So they have that recorded sa temple.
The Lord is the answer. Jesus is the answer.
This is the answer of question number 1.
Tanong sa exam ni Ma'am.
Dalawa.
If you have studied yung question, I have
Ma'am, dalawa, ma'am.
Kasi
Ay,
Ano ma? Hindi nakapa-attend. Papagalitan na napagalitan na yan.
Kaya nga kanina.
Lumabas naman. Hindi na ma'am?
Really? Wow. Ikaw na. Start na.
Ay, ma'am, nakakaya naman, ma'am. Nakakaya naman. Sana isa pa. Sana sagot na lang.
Wala na ka masulat na.
Tapos? Ang susunod na number one, refer to the old. Yeah, the old. Yeah, the first inhabitants. Okay. The people. Okay. Don't forget to write down your name. Okay? Give the wrong answer. We open our book.
Just one moment.
Hindi. Off naman.